The sound of fabric tearing cut through the polite laughter like a knife through flesh. My daughter's dress, the yellow one with small flowers I'd spent 2 weeks sewing by hand, hung in strips from her trembling shoulders. The decorative beading I'd carefully stitched along the neckline now scattered across the polished marble floor of the Adeyemi residence like broken promises. Chidinma stood frozen, her 9-year-old eyes wide with confusion and shock. One small hand clutched at what remained of her bodice. The other hung limp at her side, still holding the punch cup she'd been carrying when she attacked. "You think you can parade around here like you belong?" Zainab's voice dripped with venom, her French manicure still hooked in the torn fabric. "Your mother may have the ring, but I have your father's heart. Remember that, small girl." The annual Parents' Committee fundraiser had attracted Lagos's finest: doctors, politicians, society women in their ankara and lace. 30 witnesses stood in this grand living room with its crystal chandeliers and imported furniture. 30 pairs of eyes watched my child's humiliation, and not one person moved. The headmistress of Greenfield Academy looked away, suddenly fascinated by her phone. Mrs. Okafor, who called me sister at church every Sunday, stepped backward into the crowd. Even Chief Adeyemi, our host, found something urgent to examine in his glass of Chapman. But I saw everything. I saw the moment Chidinma had accidentally bumped Zainab while reaching for the dessert table. Saw the woman's face transform from practiced elegance into something feral. Saw her fingers shoot out and grip my daughter's collar before anyone could breathe. "Clumsy bush girl," Zainab had hissed, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. "Just like your mother, taking up space where you're not wanted." Then she pulled. The fabric gave way with that terrible ripping sound, and suddenly my 9-year-old stood exposed in her training bra and petticoat before Lagos society. Time fractured. I watched Chidinma's face crumble from confusion to realization to shame. That particular shame only a girl child knows when her body becomes public property without her consent. Her free hand flew up to cover herself, the punch cup falling, red liquid spreading across white marble like blood at a sacrifice. Someone laughed. A high, nervous titter from the back of the room that died quickly, but not quickly enough. My feet moved. I don't remember commanding them. One moment I stood by the buffet table, the next I was there, stripping off my own wrapper to cover my daughter's nakedness. My hands shook as I tied it around her shoulders. Whether from rage or fear or the sheer effort of not screaming, I couldn't tell. "An, Sister Adayeze, why are you looking at me like that?" Zainab's voice climbed higher, playing to her audience. "Your daughter was careless. She ruined my Gucci blouse with her drink." She gestured at a tiny splash of punch on her white sleeve. "Am I not supposed to react? Should I just smile while children destroy my things?" The crowd murmured. I felt the shift, the way people's faces rearranged themselves to accommodate this new narrative. Yes, perhaps the child had been careless. Yes, expensive clothing. Yes, Zainab had every right to be upset. My throat burned with words I couldn't release. Not here. Not in front of all these witnesses who would twist anything I said into confirmation that I was the bitter wife, the jealous one, the woman who couldn't keep her husband satisfied. Because that's what Zainab was. My husband's mistress. Not a secret, not anymore. Emeka had stopped pretending 6 months ago, after I found the apartment lease with both their names. Now she appeared at school events, family functions, even church, wearing her position like a second skin. And everyone knew. Everyone smiled politely and pretended not to notice when they arrived together, when he touched her waist in public, when she called my daughter the first wife's child within earshot. But this was different. This was my daughter, my baby. The one innocent person in this entire rotten situation. "She's 9 years old," I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. My hands kept moving, adjusting the wrapper, checking that Chidinma was covered. "She's a child. And children need to learn respect." Zainab tossed her Brazilian weave over her shoulder. "Perhaps if someone had taught her properly at home, we wouldn't have this problem." The room went very quiet. Chidinma started to cry then, not the loud wailing of a small child, but the silent, shoulder-shaking sobs of someone learning that the world is crueler than any 9-year-old should know. Each tremor that passed through her small body felt like a blade between my ribs. "I'm sorry, Mummy," she whispered against my shoulder. "I'm sorry I embarrassed you." That's when something broke inside me. Not loud. Not dramatic. More like a cable snapping deep underwater, silent to everyone else, but I felt the whiplash in my bones. All the months of swallowing humiliation, of holding my head high while my marriage rotted in public, of protecting my daughter from adult ugliness that kept seeping into her world anyway. I'd been so careful, so dignified, so quiet. And still, this woman had put her hands on my child. "We're leaving." My voice came out strange, too calm, too level. I wrapped one arm around Chidinma and turned toward the door. "Yes, run away," Zainab called after us. "That's what you people do best, isn't it? Run and hide and pretend everything is fine while real women take what they want." I kept walking, past the dessert table with its ridiculous 5-tier cake, past Mrs. Okafor's guilty face, past the headmistress who would definitely be receiving a strongly worded letter on Monday morning, past my husband. Emeka stood near the entrance, drink in hand, watching the entire scene with the detached interest of someone observing actors in a play. Our eyes met for one brief second. I waited for something. Shock, shame, defense of his daughter, anything. He looked away first. The marble foyer stretched before us, our footsteps echoing. Behind us, conversation resumed, the particular buzzing quality of people who have just witnessed something scandalous and can't wait to discuss it the moment the victims leave. My daughter's tears soaked through my blouse. My wrapper, hastily tied around her, kept slipping. I kept stopping to adjust it, to make sure she stayed covered, to whisper lies about how everything would be fine. We reached the massive carved doors just as I heard new footsteps behind us. Heavy, male, deliberate. Adaize. A voice that made my spine straighten. A voice I hadn't expected to hear today. A voice that carried weight even when it spoke softly. I turned slowly, one arm still around Chidinma. And there, in the entrance to the Adeyemi residence, stood my brother, Emmanuel. In his full court regalia, the black gown, the white bib, the entire formal dress of a Lagos High Court judge. He must have come straight from chambers, still wearing the symbols of his office. Behind us, the conversation in the living room died mid-sentence. Someone gasped. And when I looked back at the crowd, I saw Zainab's face. All the color had drained from her brown skin. Her mouth hung open, lips forming words that wouldn't come. The confident woman who'd just humiliated a child in front of Lagos society now stood paralyzed, staring at my brother like he was judgment personified. Because in a way, he was. If someone humiliated your child in public, how far would your restraint go? 3 years earlier, I'd stood in a different room making promises I believed would last forever. The wedding had been beautiful, or so everyone said. Traditional ceremony in my father's compound in Enugu, white wedding at the cathedral, reception at Lagos's finest hotel. Emeka had looked at me that day like I was his entire world. "Adeyezi," he'd whispered during our first dance, "you've made me the happiest man alive." I believed him. Maybe I wanted to believe. Maybe I needed to. Or maybe he'd been sincere in that moment. Before life and expectations and the weight of his family's demands turned our marriage into something neither of us recognized. His mother had started early. "A son needs many children, especially boys," she'd announced at our omugwo when Chidinma was born. Don't think because you gave him one girl that your work is finished. One girl, as if my daughter was already a disappointment at 3 days old. I tried for more children. God knows I tried. 2 miscarriages and 3 years of fertility treatments that drained our savings and my hope. Each month brought the same crushing cycle: anticipation, prayer, blood, failure. Emeka grew distant, then cold, then absent. I'm working late. Don't wait up. My phone died. The lies accumulated like debt, small at first, then overwhelming. I found Zainab's earring in our car on a Tuesday morning. Diamond studs, expensive, tucked between the passenger seat cushions where my fingers searched for Chidinma's lost toy. When I confronted him, Emeka didn't even try to hide it. What do you want me to say? He'd stood in our bedroom, still wearing his work clothes, looking at me with something close to contempt. You can't give me more children. You know what my family expects. What did you think would happen? I thought you'd be faithful. My voice had broken on the last word. I thought our vows meant something. Vows don't change biology, Adeyes, or culture. My father had 3 wives. His father had 5. Did you really think one woman who can barely conceive would be enough? That was the night our marriage died. Though we'd continue living in its corpse for another year. Zainab wasn't his first affair. I knew that now. There had been others, shorter, quieter, easier to ignore. But Zainab was different. Zainab wanted to be seen. She was 26 to my 34, a banker with one of the big firms, always dressed in power suits and confidence. No children, no stretch marks, no fertility issues to whisper about. Just youth and availability and the kind of aggressive charm that some men mistake for passion. She started appearing everywhere. At Emeka's office parties, at our church, at Chidinma's school events, standing just close enough to make her position clear, but far enough to maintain plausible deniability. "Oh, I'm just here supporting a friend," she'd say with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. The other mothers knew. Of course they knew. Lagos society is small and scandal travels faster than traffic. They watched us, me and Zainab, like we were performing in their personal drama. Some pitied me. Some blamed me. Most were just grateful it wasn't happening to them yet. "Have you tried being more attentive?" Mrs. Okafor had suggested over tea, her voice dripping with false concern. Men stray when they feel neglected at home. As if I hadn't been attentive enough. As if I hadn't spent years trying to be the perfect wife. Cooking his favorite meals, maintaining our home, raising our daughter, working my own job, all while pretending not to notice when he came home smelling like someone else's perfume. But Zainab? She thought my silence meant surrender. She grew bolder, started calling the house. "Is Emeka there? Tell him Z needs to speak with him." Z. Like they had pet names. Like she had rights. 6 months ago, everything changed. I'd taken Chidinma to visit my parents in Enugu for Easter. When we returned a week later, the locks on our house had been changed. I stood outside our gate. My gate. The house I'd helped buy with my own salary. Pressing the bell while security refused to let me in. "Madam, Olga said to call him first," the guard stammered, not meeting my eyes. When I finally reached Emeka by phone, his voice was casual, bored even. "I need some space, Adeyeze. You can stay with your brother for a while. I'll let you know when you can come home." "This is my home. Our home. You can't lock me out." "I just did." He hung up. Emmanuel had been furious when I showed up at his gate with Chidinma and our hastily packed bags. "He did what? I'll have him arrested." No. I'd stopped my brother's rage with one word. No police, no court case, no public scandal that will follow Chidinma forever. Please, Emmanuel. I need to handle this quietly. Quietly. My brother's voice had risen. "Adeyeze, he threw you out of your own house. There's nothing quiet about that." But I'd insisted. For Chidinma's sake, for my dignity, for some foolish hope that maybe, this could still be salvaged. 3 days later, Emeka let us return. The house smelled like bleach and perfume. Someone had been there trying to erase evidence. I didn't ask. Didn't want to know. We moved like ghosts in our own home after that. Emeka in the master bedroom, me and Chidinma in the guest room. Separate lives under the same roof. "Why doesn't Daddy eat with us anymore?" Chidinma asked one night. "He's very busy with work, baby." Does he still love us? I had no answer for that. Zainab stopped hiding. She started attending events with Emeka openly. His company functions, industry dinners, even a family wedding where she sat in the section reserved for immediate family while I was placed with distant cousins. The humiliation was methodical, precise, designed to show everyone that the old order had shifted, that the first wife no longer held her position. But she'd never touched my daughter before. That was the line I'd drawn silently in my head. Emeka could humiliate me, society could pity or judge me, Zainab could parade her victory, but leave my child alone. I'd protected Chidinma carefully, kept her away from adult conversations, made excuses when Emeka didn't show up to her school plays, pretended everything was normal even as our family cracked apart. But today, in that living room, Zainab had ripped away more than just a dress. She'd ripped away my daughter's innocence, her safety, her belief that adults would protect children even in the middle of their own ugliness. And she'd done it with an audience, knowing full well that I couldn't retaliate without looking like the bitter, jealous wife everyone already thought I was. She'd miscalculated one thing, though. She'd assumed I was alone. Now, standing in the Adeyemi foyer with my brother behind me and Chidinma trembling against my side, I watched understanding creep across Zainab's face. Emmanuel hadn't moved, hadn't spoken beyond my name, but his presence in that court gown changed everything. Because everyone in that room knew who he was. Justice Emmanuel Okafor, youngest judge appointed to the Lagos High Court bench, known for his sharp mind and sharper rulings, the kind of man whose very title carried weight in a city that worshipped power and position, the kind of man whose sister you didn't publicly humiliate if you wanted to sleep peacefully. Zainab's hands, so confident moments ago when they'd torn my daughter's dress, now twisted together at her waist. Her eyes darted between Emmanuel and Emeka, looking for rescue. But Emeka had gone very still. Why do some people only see their mistakes when power walks into the room? Ow. Emmanuel's shoes clicked against marble as he walked forward. Not rushed, not aggressive, just steady, measured steps that seemed to count down to something inevitable. He reached us, and his hand, large and warm, settled on top of Chidinma's head. My daughter looked up at her uncle, tears still wet on her cheeks, and something in her small face relaxed. Safety, protection. The things I'd been trying to provide but couldn't, not anymore. "YM," he said softly. "My child. Are you hurt?" Chidinma shook her head, but her voice came out small. "She tore my dress, Uncle Emmanuel. The one Mummy made." "I see that." Emmanuel's tone remained gentle with her, but when his gaze lifted to the room beyond, it carried the weight of his office. "Would you and your mother wait for me in my car? Driver is outside." I opened my mouth to protest, to say we didn't need rescue, that I could handle this myself, but Emmanuel's eyes met mine. In them, I saw 3 years of restrained fury. All the times I'd called him begging him not to intervene, all the humiliations I'd asked him to ignore for the sake of peace. Today, that restraint ended. "Please, Ada," he said. "Just that. Please." I nodded and guided Chidinma toward the door. Behind us, someone coughed nervously. Footsteps shifted. The quality of silence in that room had transformed from shocked to frightened. As we stepped outside into Lagos heat, I heard Emmanuel's voice carry through the open door, still soft, still measured, but somehow filling the entire space. Would someone like to explain to me what happened here? Inside the Adeyemi living room, Emmanuel stood in the center of the room, still in his full court regalia. The black gown hung from his shoulders with the authority of the law itself. In this gathering of Lagos society, people accustomed to money and influence, the court dress was a reminder that some kinds of power superseded wealth. Nobody spoke. Mrs. Adeyemi, the hostess, found her voice first. "Justice Okafor, what an unexpected pleasure. We didn't know you'd be joining us today." Neither did I. Emmanuel's gaze swept the room, cataloging faces. "I came to pick up my sister. I'm told something happened with my niece." More silence. Eyes dropped to the floor, to phones, to champagne glasses, anywhere but the judge in their midst. "Interesting," Emmanuel continued, his tone conversational. "A room full of educated people, yet no one saw anything. Should I be concerned about the collective vision problems at this gathering?" Mrs. Okafor, the church sister who'd backed away earlier, cleared her throat. "It was just a small misunderstanding, sir. Children and adults, you know how these things happen." Small misunderstandings don't typically involve torn clothing and traumatized 9-year-olds. Emmanuel turned slowly, making eye contact with each person who met his gaze. "Let me be clear about what I know. My niece left this house in torn clothing, clearly distressed. My sister was protecting her, and 30 adults stood here watching. Does that sound like a misunderstanding to anyone else?" Zainab, who'd been trying to shrink into the background, suddenly found herself in Emmanuel's direct line of sight. "You." His voice didn't rise, but something in it made several people flinch. "Come here, please." Zainab hesitated. For a moment, it looked like she might refuse, might try to brazen it out. But Emmanuel simply waited. And the weight of that waiting was heavier than any command. She stepped forward, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. Up close, I could see she was younger than I'd thought, maybe 25, still carrying traces of girlhood in her face despite her aggressive sophistication. "What is your name?" "Zainab. Zainab Adamu." Her voice had gone small. "Miss Adamu." Emmanuel paused. "Or is it Mrs.? Miss. Miss Adamu. Did you put your hands on my niece today?" The room held its breath. She spilled punch on my blouse. I asked a simple question. Did you put your hands on my niece? Yes or no?" Zainab's mouth opened and closed. Her eyes darted toward Emeka, who stood frozen near the bar, then back to Emmanuel. "She was careless. The drink—" "Yes or no, Miss Adamu?" "Yes. But—" "Thank you." Emmanuel cut her off with surgical precision. "And in the process of this interaction over spilled punch, my niece's dress was torn. Is that also correct?" "It was an accident." "Accidents require carelessness, not intention. But multiple witnesses have suggested you grabbed the child's dress deliberately. Were they mistaken?" Zainab's face had gone blotchy, red creeping up her neck. She needed to learn respect. Children these days think they can— Children. Emmanuel's voice dropped lower. A 9-year-old girl needed to learn respect from a woman attacking her in public. That's your statement? I didn't attack anyone. Then how precisely did her dress tear? The trap closed. Everyone in the room could see it. If Zainab admitted to grabbing the dress, she admitted to assault on a minor. If she claimed it was accidental, she looked weak and dishonest. Either way, her earlier righteousness had nowhere to hide. Emmanuel didn't wait for her response. He turned to address the room at large. "I want to be very clear about something." His voice carried to every corner. "I'm not here as a judge. I have no intention of pressing charges or creating a legal case. My sister asked me years ago not to intervene in her private matters, and I've respected that request even when it cost me sleep." He paused, letting that sink in. "But I am here as an uncle, as a brother, as a man who just watched his 9-year-old niece walk out of this house in torn clothing while 30 adults did nothing." The shame in the room was palpable now. Mrs. Okafor had tears in her eyes. Chief Adeyemi stared into his drink. Even the headmistress, who'd been so careful to look away earlier, now seemed unable to find anywhere safe to rest her gaze. Every person in this room saw what happened. Every person made a choice about what kind of community you want to be, what kind of example you set for the children watching. Emmanuel's gaze found the headmistress. "Yes, there were other children here, at a school fundraiser, watching how adults handle conflict." The headmistress went pale. "Miss Adamu," Emmanuel turned back to Zainab, "I need you to understand something. The child you humiliated today is not your enemy. She's 9 years old. She has no power, no agency, no ability to affect whatever adult situations you think justify your actions." "I don't have to stand here and—" Zainab started, some of her defiance returning. "You're absolutely right. You can leave any time you choose." Emmanuel's voice remained level. "But before you do, I want you to look around this room. Look at the faces of people who watched you attack a child. Do you see respect there? Admiration? Or do you see people who will remember this moment every time they see you?" Zainab looked, and what she saw made her face crumble. Because Emmanuel was right. The faces around the room held many expressions: shame, discomfort, second-hand embarrassment, but not one person met Zainab's eyes with approval or support. Not even Emeka. "You came into this space believing you had power," Emmanuel continued, "believing that money and position and certain adult relationships put you above consequences. But power isn't volume, Miss Adamu. It isn't cruelty. It isn't making children feel small so you can feel large." He gestured toward the door where Chidinma and I had exited. "Real power is my sister, who stood in this room and chose restraint when retaliation would have been easier. Real power is walking away with your dignity intact while others lose theirs." The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't shocked silence or frightened silence. This was the silence of people being forced to witness their own complicity. Emmanuel reached into his gown and pulled out a card. He held it out to Zainab. "This is my chamber's contact information. If you wish to apologize to my niece, sincerely, privately, without an audience, my sister will consider whether to accept. That choice is hers, not mine." Zainab took the card with shaking hands. "Now." Emmanuel straightened, and somehow seemed to grow larger despite not moving. "I'm going to leave and take my family home. I suggest everyone here think carefully about what kind of people you want to be. Not who you pretend to be at church or social functions, but who you actually are when tested." He turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and Emeka." My husband flinched at the sound of his own name. "We'll talk later, privately." Emmanuel's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "About the kind of man who stands silent while his daughter is humiliated in public. About the kind of father who values his own comfort over his child's safety." Emeka's face had gone gray. "But that conversation," Emmanuel finished, "is between you and your conscience first. I'm just here to make sure your conscience wakes up." With that, Justice Emmanuel Okafor walked out of the Adeyemi residence, his court gown flowing behind him like judgment rendered. Behind him, 30 adults stood in silence, each one suddenly aware that they'd been weighed, measured, and found wanting. And Zainab stood in the center of the room, the card trembling in her hands, learning too late that there are some battles you lose the moment you choose to fight them. Why does guilt scream loudest when dignity walks into the room? Emmanuel's car was a black SUV with tinted windows. Official, imposing, the kind that made Lagos traffic part like the Red Sea. I sat in the back with Chidinma curled against me, my wrapper still covering her torn dress. Neither of us spoke as the driver navigated the weekend traffic on Ikoyi streets. Emmanuel sat in front, still in his court gown, making quiet phone calls. Yes, Mother. We're fine. No, I don't need you to come to Lagos. Yes, I'll explain everything. Mama, please. Ada is right here. She doesn't need you to plan war. I know. I know. Yes. I love you too. He hung up and turned to look at me. You called Mother? Her granddaughter was humiliated. Did you think I wouldn't? There was steel in my voice I rarely used with my brother. And before you lecture me about keeping family matters private, remember that I've kept silent for 3 years while my marriage rotted in public. I think I've earned the right to tell my mother when someone attacks her grandchild. Emmanuel sighed, but didn't argue. He knew I was right. My phone buzzed, then again, then continuously as messages flooded in. Sister Adayeze, I'm so sorry I didn't speak up. Please forgive me. Mrs. Okafor. The PTA will be addressing this incident. That woman will not be welcome at school events anymore. The headmistress. We didn't know what to do. Everything happened so fast. Mrs. Adeyemi delete. 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 3 years too late, all of them. 3 years of watching me endure humiliation in silence, and now they wanted absolution because my brother had made them feel guilty. One message made me pause. Ada, we need to talk, please. Emeka. I stared at those 4 words, please. When had my husband last said please to me? When had he last asked, rather than demanded? I put the phone away without responding. Uncle Emmanuel? Chidinma's small voice broke the silence. Is Daddy going to be angry at you? My brother turned in his seat to face his niece. His expression softened in a way few people ever saw. Emmanuel the uncle, not the judge. Your daddy might be upset, NWAM, but sometimes adults need to feel upset. It helps them remember how to be better people. Did I do something wrong? Is that why that lady was angry at me? No, baby. No. I pulled her closer, pressing my lips to her forehead. You did nothing wrong. Sometimes adults are carrying around anger that has nothing to do with you, and they make bad choices about where to put it. Like when Daddy is angry at you? The question hit me like a punch. Chidinma's large eyes watched my face, waiting for an answer she was too young to fully understand but old enough to sense. Yes, I said finally, choosing honesty over comfort. Sometimes like that. We drove in silence after that. The city passed by outside. Street vendors, traffic sellers with their goods balanced on heads, yellow Danfo buses packed with passengers. Normal Lagos chaos, indifferent to private suffering. Emmanuel's phone rang again. He glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened. Yes, Emeka. He put it on speaker without asking my permission. I can hear you. My husband's voice filled the car, tight with barely controlled anger. You had no right to embarrass me like that in front of those people. What I do in my marriage is my business, not yours. Your marriage stopped being private business when you locked your wife out of her own house. It definitely stopped being private when your mistress put her hands on my niece in public. Zainab isn't, Emeka started, then seemed to realize denial was pointless. That was an accident. Chidinma spilled punch. Things escalated. Things don't escalate into torn clothing by accident, Emeka. Adults make choices. Your girlfriend made a choice to humiliate a child. You made a choice to stand there and let it happen. Silence on the other end. Do you know what your daughter asked me just now? Emmanuel's voice dropped. She asked if she did something wrong. If that's why Zainab was angry. A 9-year-old child is taking responsibility for an adult's cruelty because the adults in her life won't. I was going to handle it. When? After watching her be stripped in public? After letting her think her father doesn't care enough to protect her? Emmanuel's control was slipping now. You stood there, Emeka. You stood there with a drink in your hand and watched. What did you want me to do? Cause a scene? Yes! The word exploded from Emmanuel. Yes, I wanted you to cause a scene. I wanted you to be the kind of father who puts down his drink and defends his child, regardless of who's watching or what it costs your pride. The silence that followed was heavy. You're going to preach at me about fatherhood? You don't have children, Emmanuel. You don't understand the complexities. I understand enough to know that a real man doesn't need complexity to choose his child over his comfort. I understand that much. I could hear Emeka breathing, angry and cornered. Ada is still my wife. Chidinma is still my daughter. I don't answer to you. You're right. You answer to them. Emmanuel's voice went quiet again, which was somehow more frightening than his anger. And one day, when your daughter is old enough to understand everything that happened, everything you allowed to happen, you'll answer to yourself. I hope you're ready for that conversation. He hung up. Chidinma had gone very still against me, pretending to be asleep, but I could feel the tension in her small body. She'd heard everything. Of course she had. We arrived at Emmanuel's house in Victoria Island, a modest 3-bedroom despite his position, because my brother had never cared much for ostentation. His wife, Ngozi, met us at the door, her face already arranged in that particular expression women share when another woman has been wronged. Come, she said simply, drawing me and Chidinma inside. I've run a bath. We'll fix that dress. Everything will be fine. It wouldn't be fine, and we both knew it. But sometimes women tell each other comfortable lies to get through the moment. While Ngozi took Chidinma to bathe, I sat in Emmanuel's study, still wearing my torn wrapper over my good blouse, staring at nothing. My phone continued buzzing. More apologies, more explanations, more people suddenly remembering they had spines and morals now that there were no social consequences for using them. Then a message from an unknown number. I need to speak with you. It's about today. Please. Zainab. I stared at that message for a long time. Emmanuel entered, having finally removed his court gown. In regular clothes, he looked less imposing but no less solid. My baby brother who'd grown into a man of authority while I wasn't paying attention. What are you thinking? He asked, settling into the chair across from me. I'm thinking about how strange power is. I showed him Zainab's message. 3 hours ago, she tore my daughter's dress in front of witnesses. Now she's begging for an audience. Are you going to respond? I don't know. I set the phone down. Part of me wants to hear her grovel, wants to feel her squirm the way she made Chidinma squirm. Is that wrong? It's human. But it's not who I want to be. I looked at my brother. What did you see when you walked into that room today? Emmanuel leaned back, considering. I saw a woman who thought she'd won. Who thought that because she had your husband's attention and society's whispers behind her back, she had power. And I saw 30 people who'd convinced themselves that silence was neutrality. She called Chidinma a bush girl, said she was taking up space where she wasn't wanted. My brother's jaw tightened. And your husband? He looked away. Those 3 words held 3 years of marriage in them. All the times Emeka had looked away when it mattered. All the times he'd chosen comfort over courage. himself over his family. Ada. Emmanuel leaned forward. I didn't go there today planning to confront anyone. I was in chambers, finishing up a judgment, when Mother called hysterical about what happened. I drove straight there, still in my robes, because I was angry and wasn't thinking clearly. I'm glad you weren't thinking clearly. He smiled slightly. But here's what I realized standing in that room. Zainab didn't lose today because I showed up. She lost the moment she put her hands on a child. Everything that followed, the shame, the exposure, the fear, that was just consequence catching up to choice. People are only ashamed because you made them see it. No. They were already ashamed. I just made it impossible for them to pretend they weren't. He gestured to my still buzzing phone. All these messages? This isn't new morality. It's old guilt finally finding its voice because silence became more expensive than speaking. I thought about that. About Mrs. Okafor's apology, the head mistress's sudden concern, Mrs. Adeyemi's excuses. None of them had changed in the last 3 hours. They'd just been given permission to acknowledge what they already knew was wrong. So, what do I do about her? I asked, looking at Zainab's message again. What do you want to do? I paused, searching for truth in the tangle of emotions. I want my daughter to see that strength isn't always loud, that dignity isn't just for when you're winning, that you can be hurt deeply and still choose who you become after. Emmanuel nodded slowly. Then show her that. 2 days later. I agreed to meet Zainab. Not in public, not with an audience. Just the two of us, at a small cafe in Lekki where neither of us was likely to be recognized. She arrived early, I noticed through the window before I went in. Sat at a corner table wearing a simple dress, no makeup, her expensive Brazilian weave pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger, scared, good. I walked in and sat down across from her without greeting. Thank you for coming, Zainab said immediately. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't. Silence stretched between us. The cafe sounds, espresso machines, quiet conversation, spoons against cups, filled the space where words should have been. I'm sorry. Zainab's eyes were red-rimmed. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix what I did, but I need you to know that Her voice broke. I never meant to hurt Chidinma. I was angry and I wasn't thinking, and you were angry at me, at my marriage, at my existence. I kept my voice level. And you took it out on a 9-year-old child because she was an easier target. Zainab flinched but didn't deny it. Do you know what my daughter asked me after we left? I continued. She asked if she did something wrong. If that's why you were angry. A child trying to take responsibility for an adult's cruelty. Oh God. Zainab put her face in her hands. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Why did you do it? She looked up, confused. What? Why did you tear my daughter's dress? And don't tell me it was about spilled punch. Tell me the truth. Zainab's hands twisted together on the table. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Because I wanted you to feel as powerless as you make me feel. How do I make you feel powerless? You're still his wife. The words burst out of her. After everything. After he chose me. After he moved me into that apartment and promised me. You're still the one with the ring. Still the one he comes home to. Still the one his family respects. And I'm just the other woman. The one people whisper about. I stared at her. This woman who'd torn apart my marriage, humiliated me in public, and now sat here talking about her own pain like it was comparable. You think I have power? My voice was soft, dangerous. I've spent 3 years being locked out of my own house, being replaced, being pitied by women who thank God it's not them. watching my daughter ask why her father doesn't love us anymore. You think that's power? You have his name, his family, his respect. I have nothing, I interrupted. Nothing except my daughter and my dignity. And you tried to take both in one afternoon. Zainab started crying then, ugly, gasping sobs. I know, and I'm so ashamed. I see Chidinma's face every time I close my eyes. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Everyone at work looks at me different now. My own mother called me a disgrace when she heard what I did. I watched her cry and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just tired observation of another woman learning that choices have consequences. Let me tell you something, Zainab. I leaned forward. Emeka isn't a prize. He's a man who locked his wife and daughter out of their home. A man who stood silent while someone attacked his child. A man who makes promises to multiple women and keeps them to none. She wiped her eyes, listening. You wanted what I have? You're welcome to it. The midnight arguments, the empty promises, the slow death of believing anything he says. Take all of it. I don't, she started. But my daughter? I stood up. My daughter is off limits, forever. If you ever come near her again, I won't call my brother. I won't need to. I'll handle you myself, and I promise you'll wish I'd involved the authorities. Zainab nodded quickly, fear bright in her eyes. And one more thing. I gathered my purse. Whatever you thought you'd gain from Emeka, the security, the status, the future he promised, remember that he promised me all those things too, once. On our wedding day, in front of God and witnesses. Think about what those promises are worth. I walked out of the cafe and didn't look back. 3 weeks later. Chidinma wore a new dress to school, this one blue, with embroidered butterflies along the hem. I'd sewn it myself again, staying up late after she'd gone to bed, each stitch an act of reclamation. Mummy, it's beautiful, she'd said when she saw it. Thank you. You're welcome, baby. We were living with Emmanuel and Ngozi now, not temporarily, not as guests waiting to go home, living. I'd filed for divorce the week after the incident. Emeka hadn't fought it. I think he was too embarrassed to drag it out in court where Emmanuel's colleagues would see. The house, the car, the joint accounts, none of it mattered anymore. I'd kept my dignity and my daughter. Everything else was just things. At school drop-off, the other mothers treated me differently now. Not with pity, but with something like respect. Or maybe fear. Either way, they nodded, smiled, kept their distance. Mrs. Okafor approached carefully, like I might break. Sister Adeyeze, how are you? I'm well, thank you. We missed you at church last Sunday. We've been attending service at my brother's parish. It's closer. She nodded, understanding this was goodbye without me saying it. Some friendships don't survive the revelation of who people really are. The headmistress emerged from the building, spotted me, and walked over with purpose. Mrs. Adeyeze, do you have a moment? I waited. I wanted to inform you that we've implemented new policies regarding school events. All guests must now be approved by both parents in writing, and we've established a zero-tolerance policy for any adult behavior that makes children feel unsafe. 3 weeks too late for my daughter. The headmistress had the grace to look ashamed. I know, and I apologize. I should have intervened immediately. I let social politics override my responsibility to the children in my care. At least she was honest. Make sure it doesn't happen to another child, I said. That's the only apology that matters. She nodded and walked away. Chidinma came running out of the building at pickup time, her face bright with the simple joy of a good day. Some classmate had shared crayons. Teacher had praised her essay. The small victories that make childhood bearable. Can we get ice cream, Mummy? Yes, baby. We can get ice cream. As we drove toward the ice cream shop, not the fancy one Emeka used to take us to, but a small place near Emmanuel's house that Chidinma loved, my phone rang. Emeka. I almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail like I'd done for most of his calls these past weeks. But something made me pick up. Yes? Ada. His voice was subdued. How is Chidinma? She's fine. Healing. Good. That's good. He paused. I signed the divorce papers. My lawyer will send them to yours. Thank you. More silence. I know this doesn't fix anything, Emeka said finally, but I am sorry for how I handled everything, for how I failed both of you. I could have yelled, could have listed every betrayal, every humiliation, every night Chidinma cried herself to sleep wondering why Daddy didn't love us. Could have made him feel the weight of 3 years compressed into one conversation. Instead, I said, I hope you become the kind of man your daughter can respect. She deserves better than what you've shown her. I know. Goodbye, Emeka. I hung up before he could respond. Chidinma looked up at me from the passenger seat. Was that Daddy? Yes, baby. Is he angry? No. I think he's just sad. Do you still love him? The question I'd been avoiding for 3 years, finally asked by the one person who deserved truth. I love who I thought he was, I said carefully. But people aren't always who we think they are. Sometimes we have to love them from a distance and build new lives without them. Chidinma thought about this. Like how Auntie Ngozi says some plants need space to grow? Exactly like that. We got our ice cream, chocolate for her, vanilla for me. Sat outside the shop watching Lagos traffic crawl by, the sun setting orange over the city. Mummy? Yes? Thank you for my new dress, and for Uncle Emmanuel, and for not yelling when you could have. I pulled my daughter close. You don't have to thank me for loving you, Chidinma. That's what mothers do. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard. 6 months later. I stood in the market in Idumota, fabric draped over my arm, negotiating prices with a vendor who knew quality Ankara when she saw it. My small sewing business had grown. Word spread about the woman who made beautiful children's clothes, who understood that fashion could be both modest and joyful. Sister, this print will be perfect for your daughter, the vendor said, holding up cloth with yellow butterflies. See how it catches the light? I bought it, and silk thread, and buttons shaped like tiny flowers. My phone rang as I was leaving. Emmanuel. Ada, are you busy? Just finishing at the market. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's interesting. He paused. I got a call today. From Emeka. My stomach tightened. What does he want? He's getting married to Zainab. He wanted to let us know before it becomes public. I stopped walking, standing still in the middle of the market chaos. How do you feel about that? I'm asking how you feel. Did I feel anything? I searched inside myself for pain, for anger, for jealousy, found only a distant curiosity, like hearing news about strangers. I feel, I said slowly, like they deserve each other. Emmanuel laughed, a real laugh, surprised and relieved. That's cold, Ada. No, it's honest. She wanted what I had. Now she has it, all of it. The promises, the hope, the slow discovery that love built on someone else's ruins never stands straight. You're okay? I'm better than okay, Emmanuel. I'm free. And I was. 6 months ago, I'd stood in a room full of people watching my daughter be humiliated, feeling powerless and small. Today, I stood in Idumota Market with fabric for my business and plans for dinner with my daughter, who laughed easily now, who no longer asked if she'd done something wrong. Zainab got Emeka. I got my life back. It wasn't revenge I'd taken. It was something better. I'd walked away and built something new while they stayed trapped in the same old patterns. She would learn, eventually, what I already knew: that power taken from someone else's pain never lasts. That relationships built on betrayal always carry the seed of their own destruction. But that was her lesson to learn now, not mine to teach. That evening, I finished Chidinma's new dress, yellow butterflies like the one Zainab had torn, but better. Stronger stitching, more beautiful detail. A dress that said, "We survived, and we're still here." "Try it on, baby." Chidinma slipped into the dress, spun in a circle, watched the skirt float around her legs. "It's perfect, Mummy. Can I wear it to school tomorrow?" "Of course." She hugged me tight, and I breathed in the smell of her hair, coconut oil and innocence gradually returning. "Mummy, do you think Daddy loves his new wife more than he loved us?" The question didn't hurt like it would have months ago. "I think your father loves the idea of being loved. But real love, the kind that shows up and stays and protects, that's something he never learned how to give. But you know how." "Yes, baby, I know how." That night, after Chidinma was asleep, I sat on Emmanuel's balcony looking out over Lagos. The city sparkled with a million lights, a million stories, a million women making choices about dignity and power and survival. Somewhere out there, Zainab was probably planning a wedding, believing she'd won. Somewhere out there, Emeka was probably congratulating himself on a fresh start, believing this time would be different. And somewhere out there, another woman was probably being betrayed, humiliated, pushed to the edge of what she could bear. I hoped she had a brother like Emmanuel, or a friend, or just enough self-respect to walk away before she disappeared completely. I hoped she knew that revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just building a better life and letting the past collapse under its own weight. Sometimes it's just surviving with your soul intact. Sometimes it's understanding that the best response to people who want to see you destroyed is to refuse to be destroyed. That's power. Not courtrooms or confrontations. Not violence or vengeance. Just the quiet dignity of knowing when to walk away and where to walk toward. My phone buzzed one last time that night. A message from Mrs. Okafor. "I saw Chidinma's new dress today. It's beautiful. You're so strong, sister." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because strength wasn't something people gave you with their words. It was something you claimed in your choices, in your silence, in the way you rebuilt your life, brick by careful brick. Zainab had tried to tear me down in public, and in doing so, she'd given me the greatest gift. She'd shown everyone, including me, exactly who they were when tested. Some people saw their cowardice and felt ashamed. Some people saw their cruelty and felt justified. And I saw my own resilience and felt grateful. Not for the pain, but for surviving it. For making sure my daughter would grow up knowing that women don't always win by fighting. Sometimes we win by refusing to fight on someone else's terms. Sometimes we win by simply living well. That's justice. That's revenge. That's power. The end. Moral of the story. In the old days, our mothers and grandmothers knew a truth that we sometimes forget in our anger. The loudest revenge is not always the sweetest. When someone attacks you in the marketplace of life, everyone watches to see how you will respond. They expect drama, expect violence, expect you to become as ugly as your attacker. But there is a different kind of strength. The strength of the woman who walks away with her head high, while her enemies stay trapped in their own shame. Dignity is not silence. Dignity is choosing which battles deserve your energy and which enemies deserve your attention. The woman who humiliates a child reveals her own emptiness. The woman who protects that child while refusing to descend into cruelty reveals her fullness. Our ancestors taught us, the tree that bends in the storm survives while the rigid tree breaks. But they also taught us, some storms pass quickly, revealing who was wise enough to let them go by. Remember this. Power is not always loud. Strength is not always visible. Revenge is not always immediate. Justice is not always dramatic. Sometimes the greatest victory is building a life so beautiful that those who tried to destroy you can only watch from a distance, trapped in the same patterns that made them cruel. When someone tries to tear you down in public, you have a choice. Descend to their level, or rise so high they can no longer reach you. Choose height over heat. Choose building over breaking. Choose your future over their past. That is how queens are made, not through crowns, but through choices. If justice came without violence or noise, would you still recognize it when it arrived? What choice would you make if someone humiliated your child in public? Would you trust in quiet dignity, or would revenge consume you? Share your thoughts below, because every woman's story teaches another woman how to survive.